Jitsu you're doing?
Karate. Good morning,
what style? Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Brilliantly Sexy with Devina Kaur. And today we have Rob Statham with us. Rob and I, thank you, Rob, for joining me, especially on your birthday, especially on the birthday of your twin sister. So Rob's twin sister passed away about a year ago. And today, especially with everything happening with COVID, I wanted to invite Rob and share his story, his struggle, and how, when untimely death happens, how do we deal with it, and what does it mean celebrating the life of Lyssa? So, Rob, please, thank you so much for coming in, especially on your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you. And, thank you very much for having me. This is great. I think, obviously the loss is huge. It was my twin sister that passed away just over a year ago. And it's the second birthday without her. The first is truly always the worst. It was a lot easier to get up today than it was that day. But it's, thank you. I think having this kind of platform to talk to people and to reach out with them about grief and loss. And really, for me, I spun it. And my sister always looked at the silver lining of life and the positivity of life. And we need to celebrate that life. And we need to celebrate the joys and the real blessings she brought as a person, because she was a real gem to so many. As much as, I may be extroverted and bubbly and things like that, I developed that skill over time, really through her. She had that skill. So it's just like, there's so many things that go on when you're twins. And it's, listen, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
And thank you. And I'm sure Lyssa was 47 when she passed away. She left behind children and obviously, her family. And it's never easy, like death, especially an untimely death, and even, with cancer. So tell us what happened, and, share as much as you can, and we'd be so honored. Thank you.
Well, she, breast cancer runs in the family, and unfortunately she was a victim of it and got hit. Everybody else, going back like 3 or 4 generations, lived for another 40, 50 years after beating it. Mm-hmm. But my sister had other underlying health conditions. There was the conditions of she couldn't lift her arms over her head. We thought it was a form of muscular dystrophy. She was disabled really from about 13 years of age on, always had to battle health. Mm-hmm. It could have easily been me because, being a twin, this is a 50-50 roulette wheel. I mean, I could have been born the female with the health issues. And, that's always, I never forget that. And it's, she beat cancer initially, which was crazy, because I remember when she told me, and I think we were on the eve of 45, I might be mistaken, somewhere around there. And I walked into her store. She managed a bookstore, and I went into the office, and I instantly knew she was going to beat it. And I looked at her and said, "You're going to win." And she said, "I needed to hear that from you." And she did. She beat it initially and lived, I think, about 19 months or so cancer-free before it came back. And it metastasized into her liver. And that's ultimately what took her life. I mean, once it goes into the liver, there's really not a whole lot you can do when it's stage 4. Mm-hmm. But, the amazing thing was, even through the last couple of weeks where I did see her starting to suffer, with liver, you bloat, you jaundice, it's not a pretty sight. Mm-hmm. She never complained. She didn't complain once. It was a remarkable showcase of strength that really mesmerized us all. And I was just blown away by it. Even as a twin, I was sitting back going, wow, that's incredible. But yeah, it was an unfortunate battle that so many do lose their fight with.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so obviously it runs in the family, but nobody expects this to happen, right? This is still, it's still a shock. And even like watching somebody pass away, watching somebody struggle and suffer, I mean, what's harder than that? So
it isn't. And it does get to a stage where you want them, you wish them a safe passage. You know that there's no way out. You know, it's you just, yes, you don't want to see anyone suffer like that. It's just, and like anything, I mean, thank the Lord that she only suffered a brief period of time. It wasn't that long. But what was remarkable is that she kept her positive attitude and a lot of her strength the way. I mean, obviously there was fear, there was sadness and sorrow. I think the biggest thing for her, and I remember saying this when the diagnosis came up and we brought her home and she was still lucid and still relatively healthy compared to what was coming. She said the only thing that really bothered her was missing out on what's going to happen to her kids, seeing graduations, maybe seeing them get married one day, you know, things that people typically take for granted if they get the blessing to grow to old age. And that's not a guarantee. I mean, one thing about, you know, looking at, I don't know if you know who Kurt Mercadante is. Kurt's pretty prolific on LinkedIn. He's a great speaker, but he always says, you know, his real emphasis is always moving forward and doing what you want to do and living a life of fulfillment, because there's no guarantee you're going to make it to age 65. You know, in our world, especially in the Western world, we were talking a bit about this at the beginning of the show or the start of it, is that there's an over accentuation on things that are on the outside of you. And really, things like this humble you to the core. They rattle you to the core. And if you come out of it on the right side of grief, you realize that it makes you stronger and it makes you appreciate every day infinitely more.
Wow. So it's been a year, a little bit over a year, and how are you managing the grief, and how is Lisa's family, her children, managing the grief as well, and your parents as well?
Well, my parents are gone, so they, you know, my mother was alive at the time, but she was in late stage dementia, so she eventually found out about it. You know, we tried to keep it away because something like that it could be catastrophic for somebody fighting late stage mental illness, especially when they hear that their daughter passed. And she was pretty devastated when she found out. But I think the one that it hit the most, because she's still very much alive and very strong and healthy, is my stepmother, because they were also very close. We have a close family. And, you know, that part of being close and bridging the gap with your family member and your friends, I found to be critical for all of us getting over the grief period. For me, surprisingly, I think it was a little easier because I still feel a piece of my sister around all the time. I mean, I thought about her yesterday. It was almost like I dreamt about her yesterday. When you asked me to be on the show a couple of days ago, it was weird because I was driving along to a friend's house and another friend had messaged me. So, you know, driving safe, I dictated the message through Sirius to what I wanted to say. And they were asking me how I was doing during COVID. And I said, listen, you know, business is doing well. The family's doing okay. And then I said something to the effect of, I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to build the Drunken Great. Grateful somehow came out as Lisa on the script. And we found it weird. And she wrote back to me, my friend, she said, who's Lisa? Are you dating somebody now? And I said, oh my God, no, that's my twin sister. How the hell? And then I looked through and I said, that was supposed to say grateful, which I thought Lisa had a great spirit of gratitude. And then it was maybe a couple hours later, he had messaged me saying, would you like to be on the show? And I looked at that, put the two together. I said, well, I absolutely have to be here today to really celebrate what was such a wonderful life and such a wonderful soul.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, you know, how I'm listening to the story and I'm getting emotional, and, you know, I'm so like, the way you're handling it, especially your twin sister, it can be easy, Rob. And even if it's been a year, you know,
it never is. You know, you think about them every day, especially being a twin. You shared a womb. We used to call each other womb mates. You know, you grow up in our early days. We're glued by the hip. My brother, we have an older brother. He reminded us, or reminded me anyway, at the funeral when we were doing the eulogies. My brother-in-law and I spoke. And my brother reminded us when we're little, because he's 3 years older, and he used to remember that she used to rock her crib. We'd have cribs on the other side of the room, and she used to rock it over so she could climb in and sleep with me. besides.
Really?
Yeah. And it's funny because, you know, even as adults, I'd be sitting there talking to her, and, you know, you've got one end of the bed, she's lying, I'm lying on the other. And the next thing you know, even as adults, we'd be talking, and we wake up the next morning going, what? It's like there's a connection as twins that's really, really hard to explain to people unless they are twins. And, you know, it's not quite the same as identical, where you're 100% genetically and biologically the same. We're actually 50% the same, but there's a part of you, it feels like your souls and your characters are permanently intertwined.
Wow, so beautiful.
It's yeah, and I'm glad that I had that experience with someone for so long, in a sense that, you know, you get past 4.5 decades of life, and I had so many good times and memories with her. I remember even just silly things like, you know, you'd sneak off in the middle of the night to go to a party together, or to a bar when you're 18 or 19, and then not to wake the parents, you'd help each other slide through the back window, and that's just silly things, but it's things that actually bring joy and smiles.
Yeah, and memories, right? Like
memories.
Yeah, you're talking about that. So Lisa, how many children did she have?
She has 2. I think they both had a hard time with it. One is autistic, so, you know, the emotional attachment's not quite the same in her case of autism, but it still comes out sometimes. But her daughter Zoe, my niece Zoe, dealt with it pretty well. My nephew Cameron has come around really well, surprisingly. I think the father's done a great job holding the household together. He is good. My brother-in-law is a great guy. You know, he works hard. He owns a law firm. He's diligent as a parent. He cares. And my nephew's done pretty well, but he had a harder time because he was really close to my sister. So it was for him, because he's older and he's a lot more aware of what's going on.
How old are Lisa's children?
Well, they are now 11 and 14.
Okay, so very young, like.
Yeah, and you know, you never want to have to see that. It's no child should have to see their parent pass.
Yeah,
especially young.
Yeah. And so Rob, like, do you know if the children have some kind of support? What did you do for support as well? So what's the support system? Well,
the support is the family just got tighter. Family got tighter around each other. Key friends of mine reached out and really pulled me in, and treated me like family. Because they always say, you know, your great friends are the family you get to choose in life, and they are your family. And I was very fortunate to have come from a good home as well, so that the support structure was already there. And really, love does conquer everything. And if you're grieving, if you're listening to this broadcast right now and you're going through a lot of pain and suffering, reach out and tie yourself to the people that love you, because that's what's going to pull you through. And that is the anchor in the rough seas. And it's I can't stress that enough. The amount of people that reached out to me was incredible. I mean, we're both very social people. We have quite a few friends, and my sister's friends, she had an arsenal of friends, and they all came and reached out as well. And the beauty of it is, some people that we sort of fell off the wagon with came back, and they're still around today. And, you know, so you don't know where the support's going to come sometimes. You know where a lot of it can come, but you don't know. Some people will surprise you in the sense that they're not there when you thought they would be. Others will surprise you with the fact that they show up at the darkest hour and you haven't seen them in a long time. And I think it's just testament of the importance of real relationship value. And you know, that it's crucial to absolutely critical to get through times of grave difficulty and suffering, because we all go through it and we all grieve, and there's no way to tell someone how they're going to grieve and what's the right and wrong way to grieve, as long as, you know, as long as it doesn't become self-destructive. That's really the key.
Yeah. I mean, and you said something very important, right? Like, it's about community. It's about reaching out.
It is.
Support and supporting people who are going through this as well. So,
yeah.
You know what? Like, when one of my foster mother passed away, and she was very young. She had cancer as well. This was about 3 years ago. And then I went into a severe depression about that. There was also a lot of guilt attached to it, because over the years we used to be very close, and then we kind of lost contact a little bit, and I was too busy running a startup. I was just not available as much. So that guilt is, is what is also added to my depression, kind of a thing. So Rob, for you, like, what do you do when you have a down day, or if you?
Well, and they do happen. It's you've got to get up and get busy. And for me, what really helped is, I know my sister was always enthusiastic about my love of wine and beer in the field I'm in today, and the media spots I started to do on local television. She became a huge fan. And one thing that you need to remember, anyone that's going through grief, and I'm sorry about your foster mother. I mean, that's tough as hell. I mean, obviously you were close with her, is you've got to remember that they want the best for you. They want the absolute best for you. They want you to conquer this world when they're gone. And and for me, that was very, very important to harness that, because I unequivocally know that my sister would exactly want that. And it drives me to move forward every single day in a very positive and a strong way. Now, have I made my slip-ups and mistakes along the way? Sure, we're human. We all have. And grief will turn you into your own mind will turn, there will be dark thoughts some days, and darkness will sit there sometimes. But it's the power of love and the power of knowing that your family members or friends that are gone, they want the absolute best for you, and to channel that, for me, really helps immensely. But it's, I think, looking back, it took several months. In fact, it's only around now that I'm starting to feel my full beat of normalcy with myself. But in a lot of ways, it's the new me, in the sense that grief never disappears. The hole never disappears. It's the only way to really take on grief is to embrace it and understand it, and then start to understand that the fallen want much greater things for you or I or the people that they love on this earth. And it's a powerful, positive push, and focusing on the positive definitely makes a massive difference.
That's so true. Something that I talk about very often is about that our emotions are always speaking to us, right? There's always a message. There's always some sacred wisdom that comes through our emotions. And what do you think about the idea of accepting the negativity, like the darkness, the accepting the pain, let's call it like that? What are some of the tricks that you've used or that have helped you? Are you, do you know somebody in your family, your stepmother, your nephew and niece? Are they dealing with professional help, or how are you guys managing that?
I'm not sure if anyone really ended up. The odd thing is, I don't think anybody really ended up with professional help or the need of it. I think what happened is we bridged each other, and that we were each other's soundboards. Even the ones in the family that are a little more quiet and a lot less expressive of emotional feeling, like my older brother, which is a different type of character. Still, I find that we've gotten a bit closer again, and the family checks on each other a little more, and the other members that sort of sat on the fringe that you'd hear from once in a while have leapt into the fold and communicated more and more. So that has definitely helped. But again, every case of grief or loss is an individual battle, and some people sink into lifelong depression. Some people, like yourself, it's normal to be depressed for a while. I felt that depression for a while. I remember even for the first few weeks, 6-7 weeks after I lost my sister, I didn't want to do a lot. I had a part-time job at a hotel and a convention center at the time, bartending, and just fun gigs that paid well while building the Drunken Grape. And I turned down quite a bit of work just at that time because I didn't feel up to it, and I didn't feel I was near myself. And when you're not yourself, the best thing to do is to semi-isolate. You want to isolate with those that love you and those that have the best interests at heart for you. And you also need the time to self-reflect and heal.
So just like taking time for yourself, knowing who you are, knowing what you need in that moment was what was really powerful.
Yeah, it was critical, in fact. It was critical.
And that's how you find your balance. Like life will always have the ups and downs. You know, death is of course the hardest one to accept. And actually very difficult as well. It's not easy. It never is, right?
No.
But then
no.
You know, so just kind of like accepting the pain and like you said, you took out time for yourself. You started saying no to things that weren't, you know, where you weren't balanced. Let's call it like that.
No, you're not balanced. There's no way you could possibly be balanced after something like that. And for me, it was the closest human on earth. I think this has probably been the most, or probably will be the absolutely most disruptive thing that I'll ever live through, to be quite honest with you. Because half of you goes, half of you is gone, and not at the right time. Where we're 75, at least 70, 75 years of age. You start to live a semblance of old age. You start to cross milestones. You know, that's normal. Losing somebody in the midst of life. You know, it's funny because we think when everyone's living, we have this really, and I will say it's asinine and beyond stupid. I will use those words. View that somebody north of 35, for instance, in Western world is old. You know, in other parts of the world, you're East Indian by culture, Indian by culture. For instance, your culture, much of Asia, parts of Europe like Italy or Greece, you're not old at 35. The family embraces each other from the beginning to the end. It's just the way the family structures work. Whereas we're very quick to throw the book saying somebody's old at 35, but then they die young at 38. Or 40. And in reality, these years are still very young because you're still incredibly productive and have the potential to be. And I think the real sadness is what could have been had they been allowed to live longer. You know, what could have they brought in and achieved and done for themselves, or just seen things. I know I had the pleasure of traveling the world through the cruise line industry, but my sister, one of her wishes, I remember she was crying in the car. We found out the prognosis, or that it was pretty much a very slim, if not a chance, for the second time around. She wanted to see Europe, but had never seen Europe. And I can tell you, for those of you that survive and those of you that continue on from losing loved ones, start knocking off a bucket list and start doing the things that are really important to you that matter. Because one thing about time is it doesn't wait for anybody. Love does, but it's always there for you. And that's the thing to focus on. Time you can't control. The only thing you can control is how you maximize each and every day and how you move forward with goals and plans. But as we know, sometimes these things can be abruptly halted well beyond our control. And the key is to remember that and recognize it, but not be afraid. Do not be afraid. You know, be strong and be vigilant and be positive and move forward. And for me, that's something that's solidified a lot more with the loss of my twin sister. And it's probably what's given me the strength to talk about it today on a day that most people wouldn't want to. And I could fully understand why. Part of me was like, what? You're crazy. You agreed with Devina to come on the show. And I think it's one of the best things I could have done, because one of the keys of getting over grief and loss too is learn to express it and learn to talk about it. Because one of the worst things we can do is harness negative emotion. It's the opposite of positive emotion. Positive emotion you should trap as much as possible in you. The negative you want to release. And the only way we can release it as humans is to communicate and talk.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And, you know, and I was just going to mention that, like you said, like we humans need each other to connect. We want to learn from each other's stories, you know, and we want to heal together. That's what it ultimately is about. Like, you know, today it's about Rob and Lisa, but it could just be me and somebody in my family. And that's a very scary thought. So, you know, and Rob, like I'm afraid of death, and so many of us here are afraid of death. So having experienced this very, very difficult passing of your twin sister, what do you have to say to somebody who's afraid of death or has lost somebody to the
you know, if anything, one thing we should all lose is our fear of death. It's inevitable. It's a lot more fearful to worry about the unknown that's coming up through the rest of your life. And I think one of the things that's important is go out and start doing stuff you want to do, and start doing it now. If you're not happy in your job, leave it, because you're not going to look, nobody on their deathbed, and this is always something I said, and I said jokingly, but I actually really mean, is nobody's going to lie on their deathbed and say, damn it, I wish I plugged another hour at the law firm, you know, or I wish I worked another 2 weeks to help pay off the house a little sooner. Nobody goes to the grave thinking this way. I think at that point of finality, and I saw it in my father's face when he was headed towards passing, and he had cancer, and he passed about 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. You have to focus on the delight, and you have to focus on what's positive, what's real, what's good. Embrace the love, embrace the positivity, and embrace things that drive you and really make you move. And I think that's really fundamental for everything, especially relationships. You know, if you're not happy with your life partner, well, it's probably not the life partner you should be with. It's, if you're questioning some friends that you thought were friends, move on from them, because that's not the circle that you should be gyrating to. It's about finding your path while you're here. Death is something we can't control. And I think, you know, especially in our culture in the West, we put so much fear on death. And one thing I've learned losing my twin and seeing the strength that she went through with her journey to face this is that she wasn't afraid. She was only sorry that she lost time to express time and joy and happiness with loved ones and continuing to do the things she loved to do. For us that are living, that's a very, very powerful message. It tells us we need to tap into everything that makes us tick. And these losses, they really, nothing rattles you more to the core. I can tell you, nothing rattled me more to the core than this. It's still the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with by far. But what it does do is it brings up and wakes up things inside of you that if you focus on it the right way, you find your path. And it's weird and kind of amazing at the same time. It's the bittersweet that really comes out here. So I mean, that for me and is really the way that we have to look at it. This life is but a journey, you know, of many to come. And that's the way we really have to look at it and embrace it.
I love that. And I just, you know, for those of you who are here who've known me for a long time, know that I left my banking career and I became a full-time dog walker. And, you know,
wow.
Yeah. And Rob, you know what? It was one of the same thing. I was like, if I die tomorrow, do I really want to be miserable in my job? And, you know, like,
no,
knowing that I'm unhappy. So that was one of the reasons to go through that transition. And the thing is, it's hard. The unknown is scary, but you have a choice to make. Like, are you going to choose your mental health? Are you going to choose or are you going to choose to stay miserable in your old you? Like we're talking about Lisa's death right now, Lisa's passing. So, you know, these are like, life happens. And it happens in the most unknown, unexpected ways. And that's why we're here. We're all here as human beings to learn more about ourselves.
Yeah, and it's something that you mentioned about the banker to dog walker. I mean, this is not uncommon. The problem is we're taught, you know, go to school, go into specific fields of work, you know, chase the dollar. And it really is just a fiat dollar. It's backed by nothing. The irony of it all, but it's for a different discussion altogether. But chasing things that are material it never ends up well. It's a bad plan. The good plan is to chase what internally drives you, because that's where happiness is found. And our goal in life is to embrace and find that happiness, because I think when you check out, and I've seen it, you know, what made it comforting for my twin sister to a large degree was that her life was relatively happy. She was happy, you know, and she said the only thing that sucks, this was to quote her, was that she just doesn't have more time to see all these other things develop. But she has no regrets. She had no regrets because she actually focused on things that made her happy. She was happy running a bookstore. She loved the social element. She loved leading and managing a team. You know, she loved being a mother. She loved dancing. She was a terrific dancer, loved music. We grew up with music. It doesn't look it, but my mother was born in Guyana, South America, so we're half that descent. So you grew up with calypso music and uncles, you know, at parties, dancing with them and having a great time. And Lisa was always a bubbly, lively soul. So these things, and you know, and what I loved about her was she always said there's a silver lining in everything. Even when she was passing, she looked at us and said, you know, everyone, there's a silver lining.
Wow, beautiful.
And I think that's just incredible. And listen, she had her moments of fear, you know, when she knew there was no way out. I got the first phone call. She was crying. She was sad. She was devastated. We were all devastated. Mm-hmm. But her ability to bounce back is, I've never seen anyone like this. It's, you know, you grow up with health problems. She was a great athlete until she was about 13. And then the issues of the shoulders developed. And the irony was I was the physically awkward one until then. All of a sudden, I got athletic and I started to gain strength. It's like strength channeled from one to the other. And it seemed like that in many cases and many things for us throughout life. But, you know, we have to sidestep the fear and the fear of our own mortality, because if you don't do that, you're always focusing on the clock. It's like a sporting event. Think of hockey or pro hockey or football. I remember doing some sports competitively. One of the things one coach said in one of the sports is, don't focus on the clock because the clock will run out. Focus on what you're doing in there. And life is very much that way. Focus on the time that you have and what you're doing in that time frame. Don't focus on the clock, because the clock's going to expire for everybody. Game time ends at some point. So that is something that really was reinforced with the attitude my sister had going through her own journey of death, towards death, which, you know, it's, and that strength moved, I think that strength really flowed into all of us, especially me being a twin. And I feel it. And it's funny because there's always a time, and it always seems to come out at odd times, where I feel like all of a sudden she's looking at her soul, or she's looking through my eyes to see what's around right now and in front of us.
Wow. So beautiful. And, you know, congratulations on the special bond you had, you still have, because as we yogis say, you know, the soul lives on, right? Like, she's left her body, but the soul lives on. So truly, that's it's never easy, but you know, we all have to go through this, and there's nothing harder than losing somebody before their time.
Yeah, and it's even the friends of mine who are starting to go through parents declining and things like that. You become an anchor for them, because they looked at you and they said, man, you dealt with this well. You stayed strong. You know, you went through hell, losing your twin. And in that 4-year window, I lost my dad, then my sister, then my mother passed at the beginning of COVID in April. It wasn't COVID. It's just, I think she passed because we couldn't visit her anymore, and we were there regularly in the home. But it's also late stage dementia. You know, this is, they're very fragile at this stage. And of the 3 losses, obviously by far the hardest one was my sister, because parents get to late 70s or into the mid 70s and beyond. There's some normalcy there with passing around that time frame.
It's
and you're right. It's more expected, and you don't expect to lose. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I would have expected to lose Lisa a year and 2 months ago, I would have looked at you and said, are you out of your mind? You know, it just wouldn't have computed at any level. But it's, Yeah, no, it's one of those things that you're right. I mean, even with your own battles, or even with people just dealing with other things like depression, you know, other people, the regular everyday challenges of life.
Well,
Losses like this wake you up to the fact that there is a better tomorrow, and we can always reach out and help each other for the living. And that part is really, really, really important, you know. And obviously you drive things like this on your show and through social media, and I think you do fantastic work with it. And it's a blessing that there are people that want to reach out and help people and do things like this for those that are living. We got to get them back to thriving again. And that, you know what? The thriving part is not easy. That takes time. It's only around now. It's only really from about March on, I started to feel my step to really want to thrive again. And that's the window of grief.
Yeah. And we all have this, right? Like there's no right or wrong way to grieve. There's no right or wrong way to feel. And, you know, we all have to feel our feelings, whatever that is. And I just want to, you know, end the show with the, and I should have asked you about this on before we got on air, but every time we end the show, we pull cards. We pull one card. And,
okay.
Would you
like a tarot card? Is it a tarot card?
They're just playing cards. They're empowerment cards. They're a little bit X-rated. So
sure, why don't you pull it? Pull a card. Pull a card. I mean, it's like tarot cards. Where one time I had the card Death pulled, and you know what? Death doesn't mean death. It means it can mean a whole new beginning.
Yes, and that's what.
And that happened right around after the time my sister passed. A friend of mine had actually read the tarot cards, and I can't remember what I had. I had one to do with wealth and fame that hit. I had another one to do with love and prosperity, and then there was the death card. And she looked at me. She said, "It could just be the death of the old you." And really, I'm still sort of going through the death of the old me, and the new me is transitioning. And that part, I think, is going to be around for the rest of my life.
Yeah, yeah. So we all have that throughout life. We're always transitioning, right? Like we're becoming a better version of ourselves. And when we have to go through an experience of loss of a loved one, a twin sister, a twin, or a close family member, it's hard, Rob. So
it is, and it's something that you as a yogi, or my stepmother's actually a Buddhist, and it's one of those things I find the beauty of Buddhism and yogi, they have a commonality here, is exactly that. They have much more of a free-flowing embracement of our time here, and they look at passing as just a stage. It's Christianity tends to put, you know, heaven and hell. So if you haven't ran that rigid path, people are fearful of death, and it's in a lot of ways it's absolutely absurd and ridiculous. It's
different.
Yes.
Let's call it different. There is all religions have their own beauty. And
they do. Well, they do, and they all have their own beauty.
Yes. That's true. Yes. So okay, so let's pull a card. Choose a number between 1 and 54. 1 and 54? Yeah.
We'll take 47.
Of course, I knew that was coming. So those of you who are watching on the replay, we are pulling cards. We're pulling the Sexy Brilliant Empowerment cards, and you can find them on sexybrilliant.org. And every time we have a guest, we ask them to pull a card. This is a message for us from the divine, and here's the card. It says, "Sexy, brilliant, fun." Have fun doing anything and everything. We are allowed to have fun working. The more we enjoy our life, the more we have to look forward to. True happiness lies in being in this sexy, brilliant moment.
What a great way to finish the show, because you know what, the irony of it all, it's exactly what we were talking about, and it's exactly the message I really want to convey is embrace love, embrace positivity, embrace all the good in this earth. Turn off the negative news, throw the newspaper out, step away from the naysayers, step away from all the negativity. Yeah. Cut anyone and everyone off that gossips or just talks negative garbage. Focus on the positive, because this is the stuff. This is the channel. We are very porous as human beings. We absorb everything around us, and it's a gift, and it can be a curse if not managed properly. So it's one of those things. Pool in all the resources that make you feel better, that's positive, that's strong. Embrace and spend time with those that always enrich and encourage you, and also constructively criticize you to make you better. Don't be afraid of that. These are the things that really helped me and continue to help me and continue to be positive anchors. And you need those positive anchors to pull you through rough waters, such as severe loss. It's whether it's a divorce, whether it's massive career or business loss, and a lot of sadly, the pandemic is doing this to a lot of people.
You mean the pandemic?
Yeah, it could be, but it's okay. You almost want to question it sometimes, but it's or it's the loss of life, which is the gravest loss of all. Yeah. And it's, you know what the hardest thing is? It's never the loss of your own life, because that's final. It's losing the ones that you really love around you before you're gone. That's where the real challenge sits.
Yeah. And like, it's hard. It's always going to be hard, right? But over time, after, like, through the self-healing and developing inner connection, you know, the path gets easier. So thank you so much for sharing your story, Rob. And because Lisa worked at the bookstore, I'm giving away a signed copy of my book, Too Fast, Too Loud, Too Ambitious. To anybody who's watching and who wants the book, please message Rob or myself, and we'll make sure that Too Fat, Too Loud, Too Ambitious.
Awesome. I'll be very happy to make sure somebody gets a great book. Yes,
and all, by the way, all your purchases, your donations help us run Sexy Brilliant Nonprofit Foundation. And for us, our mission continues to be to remove toxic shame. So if you are watching this, if you are here, please make sure that you check us out. Sign up to become a volunteer at sexybrilliant.org. It would be our pleasure. And of course, thank you once again, Rob. Any final words before we just close the show?
Yes, just remember, love conquers all.
Love conquers all. And thank you so much for that, guys. Share this video with somebody who is struggling, who perhaps has the passing of a beloved one, because we all need that extra support right now. Thank you so much for tuning in to Brilliantly Sexy with Devina Kaur.